Here we go. Athletor Podcast. Pat Popolizio, you are a busy man, and you took some time out of your day before traveling to come sit and talk to little old me and Joel Shaw, and I appreciate it. Thank you, brother.
You bet. Same here.
Okay.
Guys.
Okay. I'm going to start this off with a bang. You ready for this? Oh,
I can only imagine what you're going to start it with.
Why won't Kale duel you guys?
Oh. You really came out guns blazing, huh?
Why won't Kale duel you guys? It drives me bananas. It drives me bananas.
Hey, every coach has their, philosophy on what makes their program what it is. We respect them tremendously. And if we ever get the opportunity, we'd be up for it. Obviously, we would like to wrestle really good competition, and the duels is a huge platform, especially for programs like us that are still, building and trying to showcase what our guys are about. And it would be really healthy if we can, not just Penn State, just the best teams in the country, which fortunately this year we've got some really good duels, and they're going to be in Reynolds. Some of them are in neutral site. So
like what? Well, I know Oklahoma State was going to be overseas, but now it's back here. Is that correct? It's back at NC State?
Yeah, we are scheduled to do a home and away with them, which Reynolds will be on fire when Oklahoma State comes to town. But
that's exciting, man.
Neutral sites, we do get a chance to wrestle Ohio State, who's obviously one of the better teams in the country right now as far as dual meets. So that'll be a good one. Cornell, you got obviously a great team there that'll be in Reynolds. And then obviously the ACC schedule. So we're not lacking good duels, that's for sure.
No, I get it. But here's the thing. You said it best when you said every coach has their own philosophy on what makes their team great.
Yeah.
And it seems to me like Kale and again, I don't want to just choose to call out Kale, right? Or Penn State. But they've built they've structured their team around winning NCAA wrestling tournaments, right? Like, and that makes sense.
A lot
that
of
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. And they've done that quite well. But I think collectively we've all agreed that if we want to draw more attention to the sport, we really have to sell dual meets. What do you and again, you've kind of built your team to like be from 25 to heavy a solid team, so to a solid dual meet team. Do you ever want to go against that just to like, hey man, I got to win national titles too? You know, does it ever kind of cross your mind like, oh crap, man, like, yeah, we built a great dual meet team, but I got to win this tournament?
Well, obviously until they change the format, that's the way you got to do it. But for us, it's helped a lot to build the fan base. And I think as you're building a program that historically 10 years ago, a lot of people weren't following NC State. So we knew that was a good roadmap to get fans and people involved within our whole community. It's had a lot of success doing so. But yeah, right now, obviously the focus comes down. And it's a strange format that we do. We wrestle dual meets basically all year. There are a couple tournaments here and there. And there's a lot of talk and hype on the dual meets. And then the most important competition of the year switches back over to an individual tournament. So it's
not only that though, like if we talk about it, let's be honest about it, right? Not only is it switched back over to an individual tournament, it switches back over to an individual tournament that is just simply not duplicated the rest of the year. No, we don't have a 3-day event with 3-way. It just doesn't exist. Why do we hold this in such a unique kind of thing? I don't get it.
I think in due time, we're going to see how important TV revenue is and viewership. And if you look at women's basketball right now, they're crushing it. And they've getting primetime ESPN and different formats to promote their sport. And that's because their format stays the way it is all year. And week to week, NC State just beat UConn on women's basketball. it was a huge deal for NC State women's basketball, and it has implications on probably the rest of the year because it's a week-to-week just like football. You know, if a team right now in the top 10 takes a loss, there's a chance they're not in the college playoffs. So I think we got to get the right people to make those decisions, but we've been fighting that for years. In the meantime, we just keep trying to get better as a program.
Yeah. Okay. One of the things that you have done exceptionally well over the last, I don't know, decade or so is identifying athletes that fit into your program.
Correct.
Do you have a checklist of like that you go over with your assistant coaches of things like, okay, he's got to have this, he's got to have that? And if so, like, what are the top 2 or 3 things on that checklist?
Well, I think what our staff does a really good job at is when we're recruiting someone, we really lay out our expectations. And I think that defines the type of kid that will attract us. And when we get those kids, the success rate happens a lot sooner than later without fighting the system and buying in. And when you get true buy-in from day one, the development is so much quicker. And so that's something that we've worked really hard at, is finding kids that, you know, have a lot of discipline outside the wrestling room. And it takes away the distractions. First of all, the academic standard, you know, we preach pretty hard. We hold guys accountable. And so when you don't have stress with the academics because you're already dealing with a pretty good student, we can really zone in and focus on the technique of wrestling. And then we can really break down the training. And I think that's what you're seeing right now with our program is, you know, we'll sometimes miss out, don't get the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guy at that weight coming out of high school.
Yeah, but if you get them to perform immediately, what does it matter? Right?
Yeah.
Like, that's important.
Well, that's where the development comes into play, because you get a kid that's really serious about the sport of wrestling. Like, you know what that is. You are a diehard wrestling junkie, we'll say it in a positive way. Imagine you coming in and loving wrestling and want to study it the way that you do, and now you get to compete and you get to kind of train and you get to have a lot of say in your training, because we give guys a lot of freedom here, and they get a lot of say in what kind of training that they do and how they do it, and we're pretty open-minded when it comes to that. But at the end of the day, we're all on the same page when it comes to the expectations, accountability, and then the lifestyle outside the room. I think we make a lot of ground because of that, and we utilize the 24 hours a day, and that's how we are able to, you know, get guys to where they're at in a pretty quick fashion.
Okay, so then that's the kind of first couple lines of the checklist.
Yep.
Let's say they kind of fit some of the criteria, even the lifestyle stuff, right? And we know what we're talking about. We don't want kids coming in and partying, because it's a big distraction. And if we're going to be honest, in 2023, 2024, it's really difficult to compete at an NCAA level, a real high NCAA level, if you're out boozing every night. It just is. So let's call it what it is, right? But let's say they make it past those checklists, right? They have their grades in order. They have their lifestyle in order. Wrestling is an absolute priority in their lives. What are some that still leaves a good chunk of the country, right? But you still have to whittle out some of the guys that maybe just don't fit in your program. So what is let's say they have the major stuff in place. What's like a major red flag for you? Like, oh crap, man, this is good. Well, this is not good.
We like guys that like to compete and don't shy away from competition. So if we're cherry picking our competitions throughout the year, to me, that's something that might not work with us, because we want guys that want to compete. They're not afraid to compete. They're willing to put it on the line week to week. They know if we have a tough competition coming up, they're they're not making excuses of why they can't be in that competition. It's more, what do I got to do to get ready for that competition? And
can I stop you there? I'm sorry. Can I stop you right there? Because it's
Yeah.
funny that you say that. Because those excuses, they sometimes, to an untrained ear, sound like, oh, well, the kid's, he's a little bit banged up, or yeah, he just wrestled and he doesn't want to cut the weight. So what do they tell you? Let's call it what it is. What's the bullshit that they feed you that they think they're getting over on you, but in actuality, they don't want to wrestle?
I mean, it's the common injury, this sprain, that sprain, I was sick, and that's one thing I think our guys pride them. I don't have to manage a guy and be like, hey, or motivate, should I say, a guy that you got to compete this week. Guys are fighting me in our lineup. We're wrestling some inexperienced teams early in the year, and I try to throw out some inexperienced guys that, can get mat time. And I got my starters that are fighting me, telling me you're not holding me out. Like I'm wrestling, and one of our better guys, we were wrestling at Fort Liberty, and he was like, why can't I wrestle? And I was like, well, let's give so-and-so some extra mat time. He's like, why? He's going to pin the guy anyways. Let me be the guy that goes out there and pin the guy, and it's just like that kind of mentality where guys are fighting to go out and compete. You look at Trent this weekend, he's wrestling tonight, and then he's going to wake up, go down to New York City and wrestle in the Bill Farrell. And I think that stuff's contagious within a program. You can get the opposite of that, where guys, we got to weigh in the next day. And if a guy's complaining that we got to weigh in back-to-back weigh-ins, that to me is a red flag. Like, we know what we signed up to do. We're we're a pretty blue-collar team. And I think that, that's hard to find now in the era we're in. And that's, I think, why the guys operate and function the way they do. And when you see them compete, they wrestle really hard, and they're going to do everything they can to try to win and compete at their best. But it's fun to be around that old school. I like to say we have an old school mentality, and it gets really hard to find that. Yeah. And the way they train, when we're in that room, you've been around some really good practices. It mirrors a lot of what you saw back in the day and things like that. And, it gets pretty intense, pretty heated. And there's times where coaches have to step in between two high-level athletes and grab one guy by the waist, and the other guy gets tackled from the side to stop conflict.
Yeah,
that's at least twice to three times a week in our room.
You don't fight?
Well, we won't call it a fight. We'll call it illegal. It would be unfortunate. Like in a real match, we might lose a point during the match for being unnecessary roughness, we'll say.
I heard Johnny's count to 10. Oh, count to 10. Let him.
You got that down good.
With recovery being such a big part of kind of competing at a high level now, how do you balance kids, wanting to compete all the time, or, overtraining with, like them wanting to be out there? So
this year and Mike hit it on the head. We got to zone in at the national tournament. That's really our main focus. We want to compete against really good teams, but we're trying to peak for the NCAA tournament. And this year we went out and sourced a guy that is monitoring all our guys' heart rate. We're doing a lot of testing throughout the year to see like where we're at with peak performance. But I woke up this morning, I get data every morning on where guys are at with their resting heart rate. One of our guys' resting heart rate is at 30 beats per minute overnight. What? If you can ever get in the 20s, you are at peak performance. So
you said in the 30s, dude?
He was 30 this morning.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah, that was Camacho, by the way. So you can tell what kind of condition. But all our conditioning now is based with the heart rate monitor. So we can track and see where we're at. And we also can, there are times, and we got guys that train really, really hard, and we will back off for 2 days. They're still working out, but, the intensity might be real low. But, yeah, we got different kinds of zones that we train in with the heart rate 1 through 4. And it's beats per minute, it's like keeping your heart rate at a certain beat. And then all our training this year has been changed overnight, which is tough for me because I'm used to the old school, just get up, let's go, let's grind it out. And now we're doing everything that's mapped out. And, you know, Adam Hall's done a phenomenal job. He spearheads a lot of that. He's into all that kind of training. So it's easy to do. Half our guys really study it as well. And then on the other side of it, the diet part of it. I mean, I got guys that travel with a hot plate. They cook their own food on the road now. So everything's mapped out, you know, and that's the level of discipline when we talk about it that you don't see in front of the, you know, the competition. This is all behind the scenes, but you got guys that we bring them to a grocery store, they pick out their own food and they're cooking it in their hotel room to eat. And that, I think, has a huge impact over the course of the year. There's no
one of the, go ahead.
No, there's no guessing on what you're going to weigh. Like these guys, half of them know on Tuesday, after drinking a gallon of water, I'm going to weigh this much after the workout.
Right. So what I'm gathering is if I were building a young wrestler, and I am, he enjoys it. My son's really into it. And one of the things that I'm trying my best to kind of implement in his life is autonomy and discipline. Like we talked about, he and I talk about building discipline in the mornings, right? Because they don't freaking go to school until like 8 something, right? So I get up at 4:30. You know what I mean? Like, hey, bud, you like if you're having like, because he's more of a morning person like I am. My wife and my daughter, they'll sleep all morning, but like he's a morning person like I am. So he realizes that he's not getting that homework done after practice. He's exhausted. He's exhausted by the time 6 o'clock rolls around. He's exhausted, but he can get up at 6 a.m. and crank out, you know, a bunch of work and build some real discipline. And he's also making his own breakfast. Like he knows how to cook an egg and put it, you know. So I know that sounds silly, but like these are becoming real traits that people are looking for. I don't care if you can run, because he's not the greatest wrestler in the world. I'll be completely honest with you. But that's a few thousand reps away, right? Like that, to me, like that's kind of easier. Am I crazy?
No. And that's where it's hard to find, is the guys that will do those kind of detailed things. Because if you put the time in wrestling, you're obviously going to improve. But if you're not at the top, how are you going to catch the competition that you're seeking out to compete against? And I think that's something that we work really hard at, and our guys see that. And you get the two together, that's when you win a national title. You know, if you have the talent and the discipline, you're competing with the best guys in the country. If you got one of them, yeah, you know, you're going to sneak in there, maybe be an All-American, you know, maybe you have a good tournament. But to be at the top, you know, you can talk to any one of those guys and they'll tell you there's something unique and different that they do that most people aren't willing to do.
Are the kids you're recruiting showing up to NC State with these skills already of, you know, managing their time, managing their diet, you know, sleep, everything that goes into it? Or is that something that, you know, you guys are providing the education and guidance along the way?
Oh, that's funny you say that, because we're, you know, the new rules, you're allowed to travel with your freshmen. You get 5 dates, and they're so far behind when it comes to this stuff. But by the end of the year, they will be perfect with what it takes to be elite. And that is, it's a process. It is. And that's why that first year, you know, you can get so much growth out of a kid. You watch a true freshman wrestle, and then they get a red shirt. Fishback's a perfect example, and he did have all the discipline coming in. He had a pretty solid, okay red shirt year, but the gains that he made in the last year, just from learning from the other guys within the program, have been tremendous. And, you know, he's going to be a pretty good force to reckon with here this year as time goes on. I'm sure he'll prove his path, but that's the type of kid, you know, that comes in here, thinks they know, and they did because they were good in high school, but then college is a different animal. And now you really do know. There's no questioning it. This morning we got up, made sure every guy had breakfast. There was every guy ate 2 meals. We're wrestling tonight. We got to weigh in at 5 o'clock, and they ate as much as you and I probably did.
Yeah, that's you are an old school guy. It is difficult for guys like you to not roll their eyes at a heart monitor, and I know it. Okay. So how do you, but you also want to win, right?
Yeah.
And so where do you stop rolling your eyes? And I know I'm being silly when I say that. You don't literally roll your eyes at it. I don't think that you're like that, but you are an old school guy. How does Hall have to talk you into this?
No, we're at a point where I knew we had to do something that was a little different. It didn't need to be crazy. We don't have to veer off course of what we believe in. But I think we were leaving some points on the table at the end of the year. And, you care so much, just like the guys do, that you're willing to make some changes. And the guys love it. They feel great coming into practice. When I watch them compete, the intensity is higher than it's ever been. And I kind of, I think we have some elite guys now, and it's one of those where we just got to make sure that they feel comfortable, confident in their conditioning. Their wrestling ability speaks for itself, and they say they feel better than they ever have. So that's enough for me. And I trust what we're doing. Just like I tell the guys, we got to trust in our training. I trust in the resources that we put into it and how much homework we've done on it, that it will benefit our team when it comes towards the end of the year.
It's hard to say what's next, but what's next, right? Like you look at again, I don't want to just use Penn State, but they are the shining example, right? Because they have won 10 out of 12. What's next? Like, so they have the training lab that they use for their performance coaching. They have the psychologist lady that they work with that follows them on the road. They have all these things in place, and it's luxuries of the rich for sure. There's no question. Is there any way for a small school, not NC State, Bloomsburg, is there any way for them to compete anymore? Because all those things take a lot of money, dude.
Well, do they though?
I don't know.
I mean,
training lab is very expensive, and
well,
sports psychology is very expensive.
Yeah, you go get your blood work. All that is pretty expensive, but on a small scale things, can we not get an in-depth diet online? And now it's up to you to follow the diet. And
sure,
let's start there, because I watched the 10 guys that we started on our team, and maybe 7 of them will follow a diet to a T, where the 3 are, you go off course one day, the diet doesn't work. So it comes back to the individual who's willing to put the time, energy, the discipline into it. Sports psychology, yeah, to have your own sports psychologist, that's expensive, but are there not enough good resources out there that if you're not doing anything, we can find something that's going to have an impact on your athletic career? And I think that's a starting point. I know one of the guys on our team, he spent a couple $100 for a dietitian, and they wrote out his diet for him. He's got a diet for the whole year. He's got every weigh-in that he's got to be at. They calculated everything that he's got to. It was minimal. Now, to get someone to come in and cook your food, yeah, that's a different story. That's the expensive part. And to buy the food. But I think there's enough resources out there, if you're not doing anything, that you can start with something. And that's the frustrating part, because we do, in a lot of schools that we compete against, I know have the resources, but it's up to the individual to actually utilize the resource. Coaches, we got 5 coaches floating around all the time. How many guys come in and want to put the extra time in? And it's usually the 10 guys that are in our starting lineup. There's a couple guys behind it that are redshirt and that are really good, that I see them in the room. There's 13, 14 guys that are in the room more than the other 35 guys that are on roster. So it goes back to the commitment, and it's easier to do when you have that discipline, drive, and motivation. So that's what's great about wrestling. Yeah, you can be on a team that's maybe building, and you can out-resource and outwork your teammates because you have that drive and motivation to do it. And I was there. It's funny, actually, I was telling my brother, we're wrestling Army, Sacred Heart, and Binghamton in the next basically 24 hours. I was assistant coach at 2 of them and the head coach at Binghamton. So resources are always different at every program. I don't know what they are now, but I know when I was at Binghamton and Sacred Heart, they were different, but there were still ways to get what you needed. It just was a little more time consuming to go chase them. So that is a little bit of the difference.
Yeah, but that makes sense. Go ahead, Joel.
Sounds like you're playing Moneyball with wrestling.
Yep.
So you obviously have a proven track record of kind of building programs. What changes from kind of building a program and getting it, to a top 5, top 10 team to turning that corner to competing for a national championship?
Great question.
That's a good question. I think fine-tuning, you look back every year of what things you did, and we write down a lot of notes, analyze, and the feedback from the guys is always good. So we digest all those things, and you have to evolve. I think if you keep doing the same thing over and over, it makes you stale. So we try to work to evolve, and obviously you start with a different talent level. I think it opens the door a little sooner. We talk about it all the time. Your older guys within the program have to do their job, but your freshmen have to step up and score points at the NCAA tournament. And I think that's a huge factor in success when you look at teams that are producing. Yes, you got a guy that's a 5th-year senior. He was 3rd the year before. He's got to make it to the national finals and compete to win it, bring home a national title. And then you have to have your freshman, sophomore sneak in there and score points, whether it's 3rd, 1st, 4th, 5th, whatever it is, they've got to produce. And for us, I think that's critical, is seeing our young guys go out there and punch their ticket to the podium. And whether it's 1st or 8th, it matters, because let's face it, the round of 12 might score you 2.5 points at most.
Yeah. Okay. But here's the thing. Okay. I actually have that written down. How do you get freshmen to perform? Because that is the next step. That's the only way you go from having a trophy to winning the whole dang thing. That's really the only way you can do it, right? This is a conversation that you and I have had in 2018, right? Like, I mean, we had that conversation in 2018. Here's the thing, though. You have, Joel said Moneyball, and that's a great way to put it. That to me means not spending all your money on the number 1 recruit in the country at that particular weight class, but maybe the 3rd or 4th that fits better, and that you can develop. But how do you have both? How do you have a freshman come in ready to compete within 12 months of signing the kid, and also play the Moneyball side of things, where you develop athletes and they check out like Mike Mock did, right? Like that's money. Like that's Moneyball to me. Like that Mike Mock is Moneyball.
Well, you go back to that year that we took 4th, but Tariq Wilson, I don't think he was a super high level recruit coming out. He was super talented,
right?
But he's a freshman. He finishes 3rd. You got, I think, was it Hayden at the time was a freshman with him?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who was, a little higher level recruit, established, came out, had a really good high school career. He makes the national finals. Those are 2 guys right now. And then you throw in your development guys, and that's what makes a really good combination. And I think we got a good mix going right now. Fishback was a high-level recruit coming out. He's Jackson Arrington, same thing. We got guys like that are in our lineup that coming out of high school, we're pretty well established. And then we got some guys in there that are a phase-on. That's a 6-year senior that never really started and is now getting momentum going, getting his time. And, you know, we need one of those guys to break through and have a really good tournament where, you know, people might not be counting on that from the outside, but we know what we're capable of doing. And that comes down to belief. And we've talked about it the last couple of weeks. What's the difference between this team or that team? And it really comes down to they believe they're better than you. And that's what we're getting our guys to understand is in the sport of wrestling, we know we have the talent. We know we put the work in, and now it comes down to we got to know that we can compete and beat these certain teams or individuals, and that's what makes really good wrestling and a good team. Guys that have a lot of self-confidence, not cocky, not arrogant, but just confident.
How do you build that belief?
With time, little moments. You know, we had a guy last weekend that was wrestling one of the top-ranked kids in the country, lost in a close match, and it was like coming off. You know, you got to seize the opportunity, which I didn't think we did in that moment, but I felt like we gained a little bit of confidence because it was like you could tell from the start of the match he didn't believe, and it was after it was like, okay, I was in a close scoring match with a really good kid, but now we got to make that jump, and you need a little more experience, but everyone needs that one match. You got to have that one match that you break through and you win, and you see it all the time. Kid, I mean, look at Kai Orini. He had a pretty decent, okay end of the year last year, but his confidence now is a lot higher, and he thinks he can compete with, you know, some of the better kids in the country, and always looking forward to and excited to watch him wrestle some of the better guys this year to see where we stand. But he's got a lot more confidence this year when he competes.
When you are looking at your lineup, and I have an idea of who you're going to say, but I don't know for sure. Top to bottom, who exemplifies what you want to put out there the most, right? Like who exemplifies NC State, Pat Popolizio wrestling the most? Which one of your athletes?
It's funny. We talked about it the other day because we're pretty open after competitions. We talk about things, and you look at Trent Hidley. I mean, he puts everything out there on the line and is in your face, really hard-nosed, aggressive wrestling. And you have that aspect of what we preach and embrace. And then you have the Jacob Camacho, which is way more technical, not as physical at any means of what Trent is. But those guys are both define NC State wrestling. You know, Trent trains like a madman, and when you say go, it's 150% till he can't go anymore. And then you say go with Camacho, it's the same thing. It's just way more technical and calculated. And when they go out there and compete, they both compete. They just look different when they're doing it. And they both have discipline outside the room. They both, you know, wrestling means everything to them. They study it. So we have a lot of that. Our younger guys, Jackson Arrington's the same thing. You know, it's what's funny is we were talking about it, and it's like a lot of the guys on our team they might follow sports a little bit, but really the only sport that they like really zone in on and know of is wrestling. But I'll be like,
do you know, dude, it's so
funny. Last night, and they're like, no, who played? What? And I'm like, how'd you guys not watch that game?
Bro, it's so funny that you say that. I found myself over the last 10, 12 years, like I stopped watching everything else. And this year, I'm like, no, I'm going to sit my ass down and watch the NFL. I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm going to watch the NFL. And I forced myself to do it just to diversify myself. I mean, I got Stephen freaking Neal in my wrestling room. I want to talk to him about 4th and goal. Like I just, you know, like. Yeah.
So that's our team. They'll, you know, World Championship comes on. A lot of our guys wake up at 4 o'clock and are watching it. It's overseas. But I'll be like, hey, did you guys watch so-and-so play at 3:30 yesterday? And they're like, no.
But I'll definitely get up and just make sure I'm on Serbian time for a week. That's awesome. Good time. Okay, let's fire up a couple quick questions and get you out of here and on the road. Pat Popolizio, what is the best? And I know, hold on one second. I'm gonna do something here.
You always got me. You got me on edge when you're like, I got a question for you.
Okay, what's the best wrestling shoe of all time?
With the old school Adidas, the 3-stripe, the ones we have now. But would you rate? What does it say?
Combat Speeds.
Yes, the old school one though. The ones that will actually go 18 months.
Yes.
2 practices a day. I still have mine, I think, from high school sitting in a bag somewhere at home.
Yep. I knew it was coming. Old school Combat Speeds.
The new ones rip too fast. I got to tell you.
And they look like they're plastic, right?
Yeah. Too soft.
Not great. Okay. What is better? As a coach, what's better? Bringing in a long lanky kid or a short stocky kid?
Oof. Well, come on, being 6'2" in wrestling. It's funny, we get made. I mean, there was an era where we had guys that were super tall. I mean, and so we do really well with the way that we run some things, but we've also had a lot of success with the little shorter guys.
Yes, like Trent's he's not exactly lanky.
No, and I mean that's the thing. We don't change anyone's style. We add to it, but give me a kid that's really long and lanky, and I personally can do some wonders with him. And that's you watch Isaac Trumbull wrestling there. That's a guy that fits that mold pretty well.
I agree. Okay, if you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about the sport of wrestling, what would it be?
It would be a national championship dual meet tournament that crowns the team title, because I think it would change the whole landscape of our sport. And I think coaches would benefit tremendously with it would go mainstream to where I think TV would pick it up. And I think it would change the whole landscape of college wrestling if we could ever switch it over. But I understand the reasoning behind why coaches wouldn't want it.
Why? Just think, what's the biggest reason?
I think they have a pretty good grasp on what it takes and how it works. And so if you're producing and doing that, I can see why you wouldn't want anything changed. But I think for the 80-20 rule, 80% of the other teams could benefit a lot more if we switched it over to a dual meet format. And it leaves the door open for a lot more upsets. So
but isn't that the point?
For fans and for the viewership of our sport, I think it would do us well. But I can see where if you have a system and you figured the system out and you're producing at the system, why would you want anything changed? Sure. And so that's the.
But see, here's the thing about that. We're gonna watch, like I'm gonna watch. You've got me already. But we're never going to get the ancillary fans without.
Let's really good, awesome tournament, Vegas Cliff Keen tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So probably the best
open tournament in college wrestling.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. When the finals start or semis, there's going to be a couple, maybe 1,000, 1,500 people there, maybe 2,000.
That's being generous. Go ahead.
Okay. And then let's take 2 top 10 teams or 2 top 5 dual meet teams.
Doesn't even have to be that many, Pat. It doesn't even have to be that higher level.
Yeah.
Iowa came to Cal Baptist 2 weeks ago, and we put 4,600 people in the gym.
Right. And so I think the numbers are out there, and that's the difference, because I've been to a lot of tournaments, and when the finals start and I look up and there's maybe 500 people, and I'm like, everybody in the finals right now is ranked in the top 20. So there's really good matchups, but no one's intrigued because there's no team aspect component to it.
I don't even know if it's so much, and we can argue this point off air, but I don't even know if it's so much the team aspect, that it's just the amount of invested time that it takes to get to that freaking point. Jeez Louise, man. Like, it's you want my attention for 3 days? Go, bro. Yeah, get out of here. I got shit to do.
The diehards will be there, and that's why the 5 to 1,000 are there. But we've when we have a dual meet and people come, they're outside tailgating for an hour before. It's 2 hours, and they're out of there.
Yeah, and that is a decent investment of time. That makes sense to me. Okay, last one.
Yep.
Who is on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling?
Damn. All right. Well, I might be biased though, because are we gonna go off freestyle, or are we gonna go off?
No, hey, I didn't say anything about that. It's just who. So to me, it's just the biggest impact.
I've been tortured by some of these guys when I was in college, and I think they're estimated on their ability. But I think Mark Branch was probably one of the best ever in college wrestling. And
interesting.
You look at where he came from and where he's at, and he's still in the sport doing some great things out Wyoming. Pat Smith, obviously, for being the first 4-time national champ. And then you got, obviously, Kale. You can't ever count that out.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the run that Burroughs went on.
Yeah.
You can't discredit that.
I mean, God, that's 4. You can keep going if you like.
I got one. You got to go with John. I mean, you got to be biased there, but
all right. So wait, hold on a second. So now we're talking. Okay. So you don't get 5.
All right.
You get 4. So you got Branch, Pat, Kale, JB, and John. You got to get rid of one.
Because then you got to go internationally, and I have to bump Mark off. The amount of torturing that Mark did when I was in college, it's hard for me to forget. So I got to.
Fair enough. He's out.
I got to get him in a duel so I can get him back. At least if I get that, if our team's good and we've got a good team, I owe him something, because he used to torture me when I was in college.
All right, man. We're gonna get you out of here. Pat Popolizio, thank you so much for coming on and talking to us a little bit. I know you're busy, and we appreciate your time, brother.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Later, bud.